very much. It's our pleasure to be here. And I just wanted to make sure, for those who are remote, do they know how they can participate? Do we want to?
Yeah, they can speak up on the phone right here, or or they can type in a chat message and I'll read it here.
Awesome, because we want to make this interactive. So welcome, and we're very pleased to be here. The title of our discussion today is "I Want to Be a Healthcare Risk Manager When I Grow Up." Getting back to the basics, getting back to healthcare risk management basics. And so, as Katie mentioned, I'm Leanne McGurvey-Yeager.
Karen Marquis.
And so we're, like I said, going to have this just interactive. And so if you can imagine, Karen and I are old friends, and we meet each other at a cafe. And Karen is interested in a career change.
Hey, Leanne, how's it going?
Hey, Karen, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
Hey, aren't you involved in like risk in your hospital?
What exactly do you do? Well, yes, I am in healthcare risk management. I really enjoy it. I get to work with a lot of people in our hospital and work on some really tough problems. No day is ever the same.
I can only imagine. But what is healthcare risk management anyway? Why do hospitals even need to have a risk manager?
Well, you know, actually, I prepared this presentation because
I'm sure
I'm going to be presenting here shortly. So let me just show you some visuals. First of all, we've got some information here about the history of healthcare risk management. Actually, risk management dates all the way back into the 40s, where risk management emerged and was introduced in the general industry. In the 70s, the state of Florida actually required hospitals and other healthcare facilities to have risk management programs. And there is actually a national association called the Hospital Association of Risk Managers, or HARM, that was established back in the 70s. In the 80s, they saw a lot of different changes in the industry where they had the medical malpractice crisis. It was really difficult to have insurance, tort reform. Joint Commission came in with their requirements. And then ASHRM, which is our American Society for Healthcare Risk Management, they had their very first annual meeting. Going on in time in the 90s, the concept of enterprise risk management was introduced, and I can tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then a really important report about shining a light on medicine that was called To Err Is Human. In 2000, a certification designation was created for healthcare risk managers. President Clinton even made a healthcare risk management week in the third week in June, and then patient safety became a distinct discipline. And then our own state society, WHCRMS, was established in the 2000s. In the decade of 2010, we saw ASHRM, that national society, identifying a need for enterprise risk management approach and some other focus on enterprise risk management. So, you know, it's really pretty simple if you actually break it down in terms of what is risk management. So you've got risk that exists in an organization, healthcare organization. You identify that risk, you analyze it, you see how big is that risk, how small is that risk. Then you have to figure out how are you going to control it. Are you going to retain that risk? What is your risk tolerance level within your organization? Maybe it is that you're going to transfer that out. Maybe you're going to avoid the risk overall. And then you implement whatever technique it is that you decide. And of course, you have to evaluate or monitor that and make sure that it's actually working.
Wow, I had no idea. You know, that sounds like it could be an exciting job. What background or experience do you need to be to be a risk manager?
Well, my background is in business and healthcare administration. It's important to have education or experience in healthcare, but I'm sure that if you ask every other healthcare risk manager what their background and experience was, they'd probably give a lot of different answers. So I'm just curious to know, within the audience, for those who are in healthcare risk management, how did you get into the industry? What's your education and your background? And also, that's for those on the phone too. If you want to participate, just go ahead and contribute.
Share.
Anybody?
Well, this is Katie. Mine's obviously a little bit more non-traditional, but I'm on the litigation side. So my background is obviously of going to law school and becoming an attorney. But I sort of fell into this work, because I just really have always had a passion for healthcare. So, this is the next best thing, and I really, truly enjoy it, just because I do get, to learn a lot about medicine, while also the risk side of it as well, even from a pre-litigation standpoint, so.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Deborah Dillon just said 37 years of night nursing.
Oh, that's a good one.
How about you, Sharon?
I am a registered nurse, and I did participate in the safety committee a lot in my nursing career as a clinical nurse. But my most immediate job prior to getting into risk management was in staff development.
Oh, interesting.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, spent about 3 years in staff development before I went into risk.
All right. Well, some people get into it after being a nurse, like we heard on the phone, and then some have a legal background, and some have both an attorney and a nursing background, and so it just kind of depends on the focus of the job.
What do you mean? There are different kinds of healthcare risk managers?
Yeah, well, some healthcare risk managers only handle claims and litigation, and some folks focus on patient safety and quality improvement, and others are responsible for compliance or privacy or workers' compensation claims or worker safety, and still others manage risk financing. My focus is on enterprise risk management for the organization.
Enterprise risk management, like the USS Enterprise, like Star Trek?
Well, not quite, but I'll give you an example of that. So ASHRM, a national society that I mentioned, they've come up with the 8 domains of enterprise risk management. So you can see that there's strategy and there's operational, technology, financial, et cetera. The idea is that in a hospital or a healthcare institution, you're running a business. So risks besides the traditional risk management of clinical or operational risk exist. You have people, human capital risks that exist. You have financial risks, legal, regulatory risks. So this is a depiction of the differences between a traditional risk management approach and an enterprise risk management approach. You can see for those that are on the left-hand side of the page, they're really much more reactive, and they're much more in the weeds kind of focus, detailed focus, where enterprise risk management is much broader, and it's really thinking about risks across the entire institution. But let me give you an example. So I had a doctor who asked that she wanted to add walking therapy to her clinic visits. And the question was, well, what is the risk associated with this? But if you use the domains of risk that I had showed previously, you can evaluate each and every risk. For clinical, for example, you might ask, what is the criteria for selecting a patient for this kind of therapy? For human capital, you could ask, what are you going to do to ensure the safety of the employee? And for financial, you might ask, what is the return on investment?
Wow, that sounds like a lot of responsibility. You said something about risk financing. I'm really bad at math. Will that be a problem?
Now, we'd like to hear from the audience. Does anybody have a definition of risk financing, something that they've done in the past, or maybe they're doing right now if they're responsible for risk financing in their organization?
Risk financing.
It's more than just buying insurance. I mean, that's one thing that I really have to emphasize. Some people just think, well, it's just the people who buy the insurance. There's far more understanding the risk management, the entire risk management process. So I talked about the cycle of risk management, and you see this box down here that circles the control piece. I mentioned previously about understanding, well, what risk might you retain or what might you transfer off? And so that transfer off is really about how is it that you're going to finance the risk. So if you've identified a risk and you determine that a loss resulting from that risk could create a financial burden or liability to your organization, then you have to figure out how much risk to retain or how much to transfer. And the most common way of transferring risk is through insurance, but that's not the only way. There's the total cost of risk, the cost to transfer the risk, and like I said, the premiums that you might have to pay in order to purchase insurance, the retention of risk, so what level are you going to keep that at, and the administrative cost of risk, so the overhead that your risk manager or your staff associated with that. some healthcare organizations can retain risk through self-insurance, or they can carry a high deductible, like you might do if you have a home or auto insurance policy.
Well, that's a lot of information. Do you need to have an insurance background too?
Well, it could help, but it's not necessary. There are companies, brokers, that can help with managing all of that, just like going to an agent for your auto or your home insurance.
So you said something about, a while back about patient safety and quality. I'm more interested in that. I've actually had some experience in root cause analysis.
Oh, really? That's great. You're way ahead of the game if you have that experience. Does anybody here in the audience or on the phone happen to have a role in patient safety or quality in their organization? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah.
Anyone?
I have an indirect role. I'm the compliance officer for the behavioral health organization. So I'm a member of the audit team with a focus on program integrity, but the crossover on the clinical side is always there.
Are you in some way or another assessing the quality of the program? Or is that part of the audit?
Most definitely, because our behavioral health organization, by statute in Washington, is the oversight entity and fiscal pay agent.
Deborah says yes.
Deborah says yes. What? Elaborate. I love technology.
I know it.
And more importantly, I'm really glad that Noah's running it.
Yeah, everyone's self-muted.
Okay.
On here, but Deborah, if you can hear on the phone, or unmute yourself, I guess.
Well, you know what? Karen has prepared some slides, so I'm going to let her.
Okay.
So, talking about root cause analysis, we go back to basics and we look at the Swiss cheese model, which was built or identified by James Reasoner. And I'm just going to quote what he said. You know, it was a great way to demonstrate organizational accidents and a framework of causative factors. Reason's theory is that humans do not intentionally make mistakes, but that mistakes occur as a result of failed systems. So a root cause analysis or cause analysis goes into, we have barriers to control or to prevent injury or accidents reaching or to the patient or actually causing harm. And when we have those barriers or defects in the barriers, we call those Swiss cheese or holes in the Swiss cheese. And when they align, unfortunately, they reach the patient. Unfortunately, they can cause significant harm. So when we decide or find that, yes, we've had a defect, the Swiss cheese or holes have aligned because a unfortunate patient harm event and of a serious nature, then we're going to pool our toolbox under cause analysis for root cause analysis. That's what I call, all hands on deck. We're doing full and on cord. Everyone stops what they're doing. We gather and we put together our multidisciplinary team. We do a very specific, rigorous investigation. We do interviews. We do sequence of events. We do event causal factor charts. We do all that good stuff to identify using the patient safety principles to go in and find those root causes. We need to have root causes for root solutions. And our big thing is never prevent it from ever happening again. The common cause analysis, another tool in our toolbox, that's where you take different tools or different types of root cause, apparent cause, put them all together and look at those 6 criteria and then filter them through an analysis which can define commonalities. And those common causes they can come back and look at for overarching system changes that you might need to make. For an apparent cause analysis, that one is for a smaller, a little focused, if you want to do it in a department, a service line, really taking a little bit of a look, but not doing that deep dive, just for those apparent causes so you can fix them right away and move the process forward. The bigger thing, and that's what the chief kind of talks about, is the incident analysis to identify the barriers used, identify, or actually there to protect the patient. A good barrier is hand washing. That's like the simplest barrier, or using gloves, any type of PPE. And if we do not use them, we need to find out why there was a defect in that barrier, and then of course, why did it reach the patient? So that's what we call a barrier error detection analysis. I think I'm done. Oh, all right. All right. So then we take how we use them is where we at with severity of the patient. So with or what we call near miss, it did not reach the patient. We caught it way ahead of time. We might look at that from just the point of how we can prevent them again. Just that event incident analysis we go into it to reach the patient but did not cause harm, that's when we probably will apply the apparent cause analysis tool. But if it reached the patient and caused permanent or temporary serious injury or harm, then we want to put all of our toolbox together and look at that root cause analysis process, which is a much more in-depth process. When we look at the common cause, we want to take all of our incident reports, all of our incidents recorded, no matter if they are near miss, reached the patient no harm, or caused harm, and put it through that filter to determine those common causes. And then the goal of cause analysis is really that system approach. I preach this a lot. We do not put blame on the human. The human was influenced to, humans make error, but the human was influenced on the system, and system influenced the human. So we need to make sure we look at both of them. We don't carve out one and just look at systems. We have to see how that interaction occurred. And so again, we don't want to start doing the shame and blame. We don't want to actually look at things. We have to eliminate human error, which is great. That's human factoring engineering, which is the ultimate, but that's, again, we have humans interacting. So we want to design opportunity for that we can pull out and help humans not make those errors, but again, mitigate the impact and then reduce the harm.
Wow, Karen, you know a lot about patient safety and quality and how to analyze errors when they happen, which is really important for risk management within a healthcare system, because we don't want those errors to happen again. I think you really hit on something that's important. The whole idea of you could simply blame and shame people, but really, how can we look at something in a more systemic way?
You know, another thing I'm interested in are the lawsuits and going to court. It's kind of like a Law and Order, but for hospitals, right?
Well, kind of, but I'm no Jack McCoy. I can tell you that seeing the inside of a courtroom is pretty rare for a healthcare risk manager. A lot of times the cases go through alternative dispute resolution.
Wait, what alternate? What is that? Alternate what?
Well, alternative dispute resolution. It's a way to resolve a case with a third party who can hear the case and help to resolve it. Arbitration is when a third party hears both sides and then makes a binding decision. Or mediation is when a third party works with both parties to come together and come to a mutual agreement on resolution.
Wow, it sounds like you really do need to be an attorney to be a risk manager.
Not always, but a law background certainly can help. We hire outside attorneys to defend our cases, but there's lots of things a risk manager can do to coordinate and support the attorneys in the case. So audience, I'm curious to know, have you had healthcare risk managers who have helped you with your cases, and if so, in what capacity?
The attorney?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Attorneys in the back, except for you. Yes, Heath.
I think the risk manager can make all the difference. The outside attorneys are so dependent on the risk manager to help access the right information for the organization, get them connected with the right people. And it makes the lawyer's job very easy when the risk manager is really on the ball.
Anybody else?
Anybody else experience with risk managers? Maybe on the phone?
Well, I would agree with everything Heath said, and then I would also add too that risk managers have a great sense of the hospital or the physician group that they work for to try to allow for the best level of interaction and dealing with personalities and understanding the personalities on their end versus the personalities of the attorneys. And so I think that it helps to not only find a good match, but also I think it helps to try to help guide the attorney when dealing with a doctor who may be very nervous, it's her first lawsuit, or if it's a more experienced doctor who's been through something a lot and doesn't need as much kind of guidance or hand-holding through the process. So I think that a risk manager does a great job of helping the attorney really understand that situation on the hospital's end.
How about you? You've been in some litigation management for a really long time. What kind of role do you usually play working with the attorney?
I tell them what I want them to do.
There you go. Good thought.
I think it's the claims people, because like you're saying, there's a lot of different types of what we do, and I'm specifically on the claims. And I think by the time I hire counsel, I've already got a pretty good handle on what I think the case is about, and I try and let them tell me, okay, you're way off, it's really this. Or, yeah, that's the right path, let's look at this kind of expert, that kind of expert. I don't know how I compare to other organizations, but I think I'm very involved, very hands-on in directing, not directing, but in the whole litigation process.
I think what we've found is that risk management really plays a role in helping to support those providers. So we have folks who are either just like residents just starting out in their career or individuals who are nearing the end of their career. And for those providers, I mean, they got into medicine to help people, to practice medicine, not to go sit in depositions, not to go to court, all of those different things. It can be incredibly intimidating. And I think, Michael, you pointed out a really good point, is that you really want to do a good match, because you need to have that relationship with the provider who's the defendant and the attorney be a very, very trusting relationship. So the risk manager or the claims person can really help to ensure that. We also work on discovery, and that's pulling together documents or answers in response to a formal request by a claimant's attorney. Or you could help the case by reviewing the medical record and creating a chronology, or you might help coordinate witnesses to get them prepared for their deposition.
Okay, so this sounds like a really cool job. So I'm thinking about applying to be a risk manager. What would you look for in a candidate?
Well, a risk manager needs to provide a voice for risk issues in the organization and provide clarity for those issues. I would look for somebody who has leadership skills. Leadership skills are really, really important, and also critical thinking. A risk manager needs to demonstrate external and internal value to the organization and leadership to the organization, or excuse me, to leadership and to the governing board. It's important to have good communication skills, an ability to collaborate with others, and an ability to manage a team. And I think one of the greatest qualities of a good risk manager is curiosity and persistence. You have to be willing to ask a lot of questions and not accept the first or the easy answer. So how about for the audience? If you were hiring a new risk manager, what would you be looking for? What do you think are some of the good and important qualities? Anybody on the line?
On the line?
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
What do you look for any specific certifications? I mean, any education, are those required, or?
Sometimes. So the certification or the CPHRM can be a required or a preferred qualification for positions. I think the CPHRM is really the gold standard that organizations look for. You have any other?
I'm hiring right now a patient safety specialist,
Yeah.
so that's, so my administrative director said, we need to find somebody who has a certification. That's not going to happen. I mean, that's pretty rare that somebody comes walking off the block with CPPS, and that's what we believe is the gold standard for patient safety. So I look for the same criteria, and that as somebody that can be very motivated, and that would be my requirement, that they would obtain that within a certain amount of time. But you really want somebody who could be flexible, to be really wanting to learn all the time. And for me, they have to be so calm under fire and be able to think clearly when everybody else is not.
So go ahead, Sharon.
I was just going to add that there's been a lot of discussion on, do you need a healthcare background in order to be a risk manager, or is it valuable? And I guess my experience has been that I've worked with risk managers without a healthcare background that has adjusted very well, and others that just couldn't quite catch why this incident was a problem, because the patient, had to go to surgery, or some other, type of care. So I think that could be a qualifier depending on what kind of experience you're looking for and what their role is.
Well, yeah, I think that's a really good point. So we work very closely with our patient relations department. So I see it as coming together of three different kinds of skills and knowledge and background. The advocacy for the patient, so the ability to be able to see something through the patient's eyes, the ability to see the safety and the quality, and carrying them through all of the different ways in which you can look at it from a systemic way and understand the quality of care. And then also just really have that risk background to understand what might this look like down the line should a claim come forward. So if you work those three functions together, I think it works, it's like an orchestra in many ways, because you have somebody looking out for the patient or the family, you have somebody who's doing that quality investigation, you have somebody who's also thinking ahead about what could happen should there be a liability to the organization.
Anybody from the,
Yeah.
anybody comment?
No. Okay. Well, so we wonder, what kind of a risk manager are you? Are you the firefighter, the person who runs in when the fire's happening and you got that fire hose? Are you the police person? Are you the police, the people that people are always going, oh, well, they're always going to say no to this or stop this? Are you the person who comes in after the fact and kind of cleans the mess up? Or you know, the ones, again, the people that they say, well, they always say no, so it's never going to go anywhere. Instead, we really say that the healthcare risk manager for now and for the future is somebody who is like a toolman, somebody who has a lot of resources, who can point people in the right direction, or if you are somebody that people come to for support and help, guidance. Somebody who brings value to the organization. I really have to emphasize that. It's not about cleaning things up after there's a mess. It's really about bringing value in on the front end. It's about thinking strategically and helping to lead that within your organization. It's also being a really good detective. It's somebody who, like I said, doesn't take no that root cause. Or a gardener, somebody who plants some seeds and then helps that grow within the organization. And again, that's really where you're collaborating with others, working with others to make something happen.
I bet you're always the first one they call when there's a problem.
Well, sometimes. And you actually hope that people call risk management even when there isn't a problem. It's important to be available and to be a resource in the organization. Sometimes I know the answer, but more often than not, I don't know the answer, and I let that person know that I need to do some research or contact others in the organization or even outside of the organization. You know, your greatest allies are other risk managers, and I belong to the State Society of WHCRMS and the National Society of ASHRM, and through those networks, you can bet that at least someone has dealt with the very issue you may need help with. ASHRM has just published a book, actually, on healthcare risk management fundamentals. And this is a great reference to get you started on how to be a healthcare risk manager. So Karen, good luck to you. If I can be of any other assistance, also, please call me. Also know that the WHCRMS community is a great place to network and provide resources for a new risk manager.
Thank you, Leanne. You're all your guidance.
You're very welcome.
Any questions?
I have one comment.
Yeah.
You're a little witty now. Sometimes it's the ones who take yes for an answer too quickly that can be the biggest problem.
Yeah, give me an example.
This is what caused the problem. We acknowledge this was the one thing, and then nobody looks any further because they have really 10 other answers buried in there. So I would just say, not only don't take no for an answer, sometimes don't take yes for an answer.
That's a good point.
I think that's a good point. When you were showing that process cycle, I was thinking that with risk identification, then the second step being analysis, you could actually add an arrow back between analysis and risk identification, because we could set ourselves up for missing the true issue if we rush to frame the risk as being issue A, when deeper analysis reveals it's really B, or a combination of the two. So I think it's important to build a culture where you don't rush to yes and have a lemming mentality among your group, but you have a level of trust in your dynamics such that you can go back and forth and really discern the true issues.
One of the things I teach for root cause analysis, I always say question the answers. Don't take the first thing you thought or heard. Validate and verify when you're going through those layers of people you're going to interview. So, make sure you don't just pick up that yes right away.
I think it also goes to litigation strategy, I should say. the memo or the email or the document that you go, oh, okay, this isn't so much. That's one of those things that you don't want to have. So, as a front end, just like what Teresa was saying, in risk management, you can really work that case up. And, if you have a system whereby these incidences have that very rigorous root cause analysis, have that quality investigation, that helps when you do have that claim, because then you have this really nicely preserved investigation, because the claim, of course, doesn't happen until, almost 3 years later, when memory fades and you're gone and everything, but you have this nicely preserved investigation to help you understand what really happened. Go along with that is correct.
Anything, questions from anybody?
There's only a couple people on the phone.
Oh,
Most
okay.
of them don't have mics,
Okay.
and they're using the internet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, there's our health service manager, okay.
This is Deborah. I have a question.
Okay.
So how long are you risk manager? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, go ahead.
How long do you work as a risk manager before you're not second guessing yourself on that?
120 years.
I was going to say, that's a competency that you should always have. That's why I think Leanne's pointing out using the resources through WHCRMS, through ASHRM. The ASHRM Exchange is great to post questions on and get some good feedback. But as I've been in risk management for a long time, and we have a famous saying in Virginia Mason, we're building the plane as we fly it. And that's pretty much sometimes in risk management is that we're building as we fly it. So I think that there's always, I think you should be second. There's times where you should be. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and that helps a lot. Thank you.
I think you have to be quick to think on your feet, but it is, as you go along, that ability to, think critically and just question, well, okay, is that correct? Have I checked here? Yep, okay, go.
Yeah.
I think that, and that happens through experience.
Right. And I love it when they say, well, I'm sure you've handled this before. How'd you handle it? I'm like, no, I haven't. I'm sure I have, but no. We need to start from square one. I can't. So it's always something new.
Yeah, and we said, just like what Heath and I, we said at the annual conference, it's always on Friday at 4:30 when you get those really oddball questions, and you have to think, okay, now what am I going to do? And when you have that network already pre-built, you know your go-to people, it makes it so much easier. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, and well, I just wanted to, before we end, that you reminded me that I should give a quick plug for ASHRM, because if you are a WHCRMS member and are not an ASHRM member, it is such a valuable resource. They have so much more. I mean, we try to offer as much as we can, but we're talking about thousands of risk managers across the country, thousands of educational materials available online, forums, online webinars and CMEs and CLEs and all those sorts of things. So I would definitely put a plug in for that if that's something that you have not joined or are considering joining. If it's something your organization won't cover with your membership, you could certainly consider applying for the scholarship, and maybe that's something that WHCRMS could cover for a WHCRMS member. So please consider that. And then also in the future for WHCRMS Education Committee, we have an education committee and our annual conference committee. If that's something that you'd like to get involved in, there's also a link on our website. You can let us know, and we'd love to have you help us plan these sorts of events for the future. So,
Also plug in too.
yes.
Both of us belong to ASHRM committees.
Yes.
And so it's also fun to volunteer on the ASHRM piece. I was on the content committee with a colleague yesterday, and they said 135 presentations were submitted for the conference this year.
Oh, wow.
So obviously they can't use all of them. So we're going to take that information and try to build content for our education for the next year. So we can share that too, because it's all great stuff.
Really.
Okay, well, thank you, Leanne and Karen, for a wonderful presentation.